In the forts, camp followers often became combatants. Uh, Most people have heard of a person called Molly Pitcher, and they think Molly Pitcher is an actual person. There's no such person as Molly Pitcher. She is to the American Revolution what Rosie the Riveter was to World War II. There was no person named Rosie the Riveter. That was the name they gave to every woman who worked in the factories that built the machinery that made it possible for the American Army and Navy and Marine Corps to fight. Molly was a very common nickname in the 18th century, and they were called Molly Pitchers because the cannons in the forts had to be loaded by hand, and when they were fired, they became very hot. And so they had to be cooled down with water. And so the men would fire the cannon, and then they would shout, "Molly Pitcher!" And a woman would come running out of the barracks into the open space where British cannonballs and Indian arrows were coming over the fortress wall, and they would come to water down the cannons. Sometimes, if the man operating the cannon or his assistant fell wounded or dead, the women would take up that position and they would fire the cannons. And that's where we get the other iconic picture, which is of a woman in petticoats with her hair pinned back loading the cannon. But there were literally hundreds of these women. Many of them were wounded in these battles. And researchers have found almost 250 requests for pensions as wounded veterans that went into the Continental Congress and then the Confederation Congress from women. Almost none of them received any reimbursement or any compensation for their battle wounds. We know of one, for instance, from New York State named Hannah Corbin. She was wounded while she was operating a cannon. She lost the use of her left arm. She was carried off with other wounded people in a wagon. It must have been excruciatingly painful. And she did sue, and she got a veteran's pension. But most of the women who participated did not, and have disappeared, sadly, from our history books where they have a rightful place to be.